Hello, welcome to another TopoDOT webinar series for extracting value. I'm going to help you today navigate the updates associated with our latest release, which is going to be considered a soft release, and we'll kind of get into that in a second. My name is Mike Cook. I'm the lead applications engineer over at TopoDOT. I've been here for 10 plus years, and I'm working with the support, development, and sales teams, and I'm definitely not alone. And for those of you who don't know us, here we are. But we have a dedicated team to help support the TopoDOT community. We're a software development company, but we provide training support and consulting services. And with our newest team member, Marcella, she's going to be front and center. So help welcome her to a new role as a graphics designer at TopoDOT. And if you're not familiar with TopoDOT or this is your first webinar that you're seeing, TopoDOT is a industry-leading software application for extracting high-quality topographies, 3D models, and assets from your point cloud data, which ultimately feeds downstream operations across multiple disciplines. And the primary applications for TopoDOT include the following: transportation corridors, both rail and roadway, electric and power corridors for transmission, distribution, and substations, as well as bridges, tunnels, and general structures. Our focus today is going to be revolving around software updates. So first we're going to do a quick look at our agenda, and I know there's a lot of stuff on here, but what I'm going to do is just kind of introduce a little bit of housekeeping items at the front end for versions of Connect and whether it's Microstation or ORD. And I'm going to break all of the updates and new tools into 3 categories. So we're going to do like management and visualization. I got extraction and modification, and then attribution at the end, as well as some additional tips and tricks and notes at the end there. All right, so what are we here for? Basically, we're talking about the latest update of TopoDOT, specifically for Microstation CONNECT. And if you're wondering if this is going to work for you, you just have to make sure that you have update 15 or more. I think the current one is update 15. And that's going to allow you to have the best setup. Now, if you don't have update 15, but you still want to use this soft release, then there's going to be a few things that won't work. It's a small sacrifice, though, to get your hands on the latest features. And the sacrifice there is basically anything that's linked or working with the coordinate system is going to either cause issues or potentially even a crash. So you got the Topo Aerial tool importing KMLs, attributing lat and long information, doing any type of Google Earth export on the TopoDOT side. So if there's a TopoDOT tool that's linked to the coordinate system information and that is crucial to your operations, avoid the update. If it's not, or you want to play around with some of the newer tools, that's pretty much what you're going to run into. This is going to also apply to the ORD users out there. So we're kind of waiting for a release from Bentley to get that up to speed, which would be an equivalent to update 15. And as a rule of thumb, we're really just trying to match the release dates that Bentley puts out, because the update numbers don't necessarily match, but we try to match those release dates. And I think the ORD one is slightly behind the last release for update 15 of Microstation. So how's this going to unfold? Basically, I'm going to go through some quick explanations. This isn't going to be a full-blown tutorial. We're going to look into what the tool looks like. We're going to demonstrate it. And then if there's any final remarks, I'll add that in there. And of course, if you want to take notes, feel free to do so, but just keep in mind that this is going to be recorded and uploaded for you at a later date. All right, so diving into the first category, management and visualization, we have added support for subdirectories of point cloud data. And this is going to be found in the conversion wizard the tile parsing wizard, and also the register scan folder to icons, which is going to ultimately just give us a TVW file. So in some cases, all your data is in one folder, and that's it. But there are individuals out there dealing with multiple projects or multiple data sets on the same project, but they're all in subfolders, and you want to keep it organized that way. So that's why we added this subdirectories option to help with that. We added support to take advantage of the point source ID. So that's just information associated with a point cloud that we can further use. And that's going to be found in the display mode. You're going to see it in the deviation overview tool, as well as the tile parsing wizard. So we may have seen this previously in a past webinar, but for the tile parsing wizard, which is the lower left-hand corner, you got that override point source ID with file index. That's where that lives. And just to kind of add on to this, so display settings, that's pretty straightforward. It's kind of similar to individual scans. The way it's displayed, you're just going to see a bunch of colors. But before this, we could differentiate between passes based on separated files, but now we're going to be able to separate based off of this point source ID information. So if you do have one LAS file and it's been merged, one way to possibly pull that apart or differentiate between the multiple passes is through that point source ID. So that's why it also spills over into the point cloud deviation overview, because we can now compare those separate passes based off the point source ID information, not necessarily the separate files. And you got an image there that looks very similar to the individual scans, but that's actually point source ID separation. And I threw this one in there because I see a lot of people not necessarily using it. So it's been around for a little bit, but what it's used for is to inspect information associated with a point cloud. Now you can inspect before you load the data, which would be the preview point cloud file contents. It just pops up a little interface and you can browse for a file. And then when you load that up, it'll actually list out all the XYZ, intensity, RGB information, does it have classification, and ultimately that point source ID that we would be looking for. So if you're not sure, check it with this tool. If you've already loaded the data, there is now, it used to be a key in, there is a button for this now that will allow you to basically just sample the point cloud data, and it will give you a readout of what's there in a very similar fashion. You'll probably find that button right next to the tool right above it. All right, so a new feature associated with the imagery tools is going to be loading a grouped set of images. Okay, so before it's just one image at a time. I mean, you could limit the camera and all that stuff, but now we're looking at multiple cameras being loaded in one spot. Okay, that's also going to provide a little bit more synergy with the advanced imagery tool. So I list that as a companion tool right now. But the idea is you just have to know what camera belongs in which view, depending on how you want to set it up. So in this example, I have view 3 and 4 for a left-facing and a right-facing forward set of cameras. Okay, you can also you can set this up however you want, basically. So let's see what that looks like. So here I'm going to activate the tool. I've already got it set up to which images go to which views. And you do just like you've done before, snap to the data, snap to an element. I'm going to refresh the advanced image tool here and just move forward. So that hasn't changed, but you can see how easy it is to just continue with this same setup and also move that same setup to the other side of the road. So you no longer have to juggle those different trajectories. Very useful for general navigation, using it with asset ID, locating objects. I see a lot of potential here. All right, so the next set of tools that we're going to look into is the extraction and modification tools. The first one up is going to be the power line or wire extraction set of tools. And our first one's going to be extract wires by cross-section. So this one's going to automatically find all wires within a cross-section. An update view with a wire preview is going to allow for quick examination. It's also going to be displaying an easy-to-follow numbering system within the tool and in your drawing space, so you can keep track of those complex configurations. This one's a simple one. If you look on the right-hand side, we only have 4 wires, but sometimes they're crossing, they're coming close to each other. It's very hard to tell what's going on with a numbering system and a preview and a cross-section view. It should help out a lot. Following this main tool, because that one's going to do the heavy lifting for us, we have the manual power line extraction tool. We have the adjust power line, extend power lines, and join power lines. All right. So the manual power line is great for extracting isolated wires. The adjust power line is basically going to allow you to move this vertically, a single line vertically, if you need to. And sometimes maybe the lines terminate, you don't have wires on the other side, or maybe you don't have enough data. You can extend those wires along the path of the actual cable. It's not just a linear extension. So let's say you have a tree close by and you have to fall short. You can have the tool process just before the tree around the pole and then extend those wires. If the tree's somewhere in the middle of your span, just have the tool process through that. And of course, joining power lines, we used to have a single line at a time, but now you could do multiple lines and multiple spans at once, which we'll see that in a moment. All right, so putting this into practice, this is how it looks. We're going to use a combination of power line tools here to essentially locate the span across this road corridor. And we're going to be starting with the power line extraction by cross-section. Simply just define the cross-section. It's going to automatically find those wires for you. You can check out the preview. Once you're ready, you just simply accept. And then once you're done getting the spans, you're going to follow that with the modification tools. So there's going to be some limitations on gathering everything, but we want to follow up with those companion tools associated with the power lines. So you got isolated single wires. And this is actually a pretty good example where there's not a lot of wire information on the other side of one of the lower wires here. So you can extend one end into the pole, and then you can extend the other side where there was no data. So if there's no data on that side of the span, it won't show up in the tool. So you can use that to help fill in those gaps. And then here we could do multiple lines at a time. And then the final routine of just joining the wires. So joining the wires, you just do this on multiple lines. It's going to go ahead and project those to each other and also provide your attachment point. So all lines right now in this example, we've gathered all wire information in a matter of seconds. And for those of you who are new to this or looking for more Powerline content, please visit our website where you'll find an entire webinar that's dedicated to this topic. We break it down into 3 categories or 3 cases, and we go through that tooling in a little bit more depth. So definitely check that out. It's going to be webinar number 1034, and I'll have the link down below. All right, so the next extraction tool is going to be the drape element to data. There is a newer extraction mode for this tool, which we're calling surface analysis. Previously, the main go-to mode was the normal mode, but that has been renamed to average. And then we modified it even further to become the surface analysis one. So the surface analysis is great for steep slopes. Previously, we had to strategically adjust the sample size for optimal results in order to avoid low-hanging results seen as red points in the cross-section. However, the guesswork has essentially been taken out now with this newer mode. So with the newer mode, this is going to account for the steeper terrains or tilted samples to ultimately better represent the actual point cloud surface seen as a highlighted line in the cross-section. And then there's also going to be noise removal. This is going to help clear out any low-hanging points. It may also clear out high-hanging points too, but that feature has also been added to keep things on track. So just looking quickly at the image that I have here. So this is a cross-section. We draped a line down, and I'm showing you what the normal mode or the average mode now would be compared to the surface analysis resulting lines. So on flat surfaces, they're pretty close in nature. Keep in mind this is a big sample, so I've exaggerated it 2 feet. So with that big sample, you're gonna see differences like this. But for the flat surfaces, they're going to be relatively the same. Steeper surfaces, you're going to see more of a separation. All right, so this has gone under this tool in particular, the template by cross-section tool. This has gone under the radar for a little bit, and I'd like to bring it back up. It is fairly new, but I don't know if we covered it in the last TUC webinar or any other webinar associated with break lines, but this is great for touch-up on lines requiring more detail or just extra handles. Essentially, the tool is going to interact with existing line work to improve production times. You'll find this feature within the Options tab, along with the search area. And the search area, well, we'll get into that in a little bit, but if you have lines outside of the sampling window, we've added that search area to include those lines. This search area doesn't necessarily affect the actual fitment of the template to the point cloud. So if I don't know if you guys can see my mouse. I'm going to have a video following this. So for now, this is your sample box that you would define, and you want to usually drop that in the vicinity of your profile within the point cloud. And you don't really want it too large. So what we have is that buffer to include those extra lines within the intersection mode to update those lines. Let's let a video explain it though. All right, so looking at this in action, it's common to have breaks or polylines that need more handles or nodes. And in order to do this or better represent the actual curb, this is a great example, because we just want to come in and use an auto routine to find that profile for us and locate the breakpoints, but we also wanted to update those existing lines so that we don't have to go through any routines of adding in vertices and snapping it to lines. It would just ultimately be a lot of clicks. So the lines are going to be automatically updated, and you're going to get the added benefit of verifying fitment right away via the update view, which, if I back this up, the update view is view 2 here in this case, which can be followed by any necessary adjustments with the Quick Adjust Line Work tool. Okay, so this ultimately is just going to allow for faster modification times. So there we jump right into the Quick Adjust while we're in that inspection or update window there. All right, so we have a lot of tools to cover, so we'll move on to the next one. I'm going to break down the next section into a group of these tools. They're all going to do some type of break line modification or some type of miscellaneous routine. So at a quick glance, we're going to cover the Smart Parallel tool, which ultimately is going to have an added feature for locking elevations during an actual move. This will result in actually a true horizontal offset. And you're going to want to use these on 3D polylines. 2D or 3D flat lines, not so much, but if you have 3D lines that are changing in elevation, you're going to definitely want to use this tool. Smart B-Spline tool, we've added also a locking mechanism to the elevations. Very handy. We'll see where that comes into play. And we also have the inserting connecting vertices, where we're just going to essentially produce handles when tying into specific lines. Deleting points near selected lines. This tool has been around for quite some time, but we did add support for the base elements to be points. So now you can delete points that are close to points. And then we have a fence around elements tool, another fencing feature, handy, but essentially you just grab your elements and you can fence around those elements that you have selected. So let's take a look at the Smart Parallel a little bit more in depth here. And we're going to see what we would previously encounter with the general Microstation Move Parallel. So this is a 3D line. You go to try and move it, and what happens is your ACS tilts on you, and what's actually happening is it looks like you're moving horizontally, but you're actually changing in elevation significantly. If that ACS is close to vertical, you could be going 1,000 feet below or above your existing line. So we wanted to help with this this issue. So with the Smart Parallel tool, it's actually locking that elevation for you. So it's a true offset tool. You're going to be able to lock distances that you want to move it at. I already said you got the locking elevations, but you're going to also have the added benefits of draping this feature right away if you want to. So if you're doing a lot of paint stripe lines and you just need to copy, move over, and drape, this is a great little tool to use. All right, Smart B-Spline. Similar concept, locking elevations, different tool. So we've added that retain elevations for both tools here, which so you got a B-Spline tool that does the whole element, and then you got one that does a partial part of the element. But essentially, yeah, and actually before I scoot forward, remember this. This is a Smart B-Spline tool, so it's basically designed to take a decimated polyline and smooth it into a denser polyline. And the key here is that we're going to end up with a polyline. or a polyline element. So we're taking a polyline element and we're making another polyline element that's just smoother in nature and with denser amount of handles. Now I have an example of why you would want to lock the elevations. So if you're doing curb work along a curve and you are coming into transition zones where a ramp may be, you're going to have kind of a high point and low point associated with your curb work. You might see that on your top of curb, back of curb. Either way, it's a sharp turn. So if you do a traditional B-spline or smoothing operation, what it will do is it will adjust the vertical in a way you would not want it to be adjusted. So we can actually see in the far right here a resulting line from that exaggerated profile dipping down most likely below the flow line, below the actual data. It's just something that you wouldn't want to do. And the workaround for that was to avoid splining these certain areas, but we just wanted to make it easy, grab everything and just spline it. Because if you lock those elevations, you will not encounter this. All right, so let's take a look at what that looks like in action. So I have a very similar setup here of what we were just seeing. I'm going to grab my lines. We'll run the tool with that locking elevations on. So we have adjusted our horizontals. Those are nice and smooth. The verticals are untouched. Okay, so again, if you're doing a lot of curb work, you're dealing with a lot of transition zones, this is going to be a pretty helpful tool when going around curves. All right, next up is going to be inserting those connecting vertices. So this is going to be found in the extraction tab up in the ribbon, all the way over to element modification. But the idea here is, we can see in the left image that we have two polylines connecting to a back of curb line. And we need to insert handles or nodes along that back of curb line, essentially where these other lines connect. This is where the insert connecting vertices comes into play. Just select the polylines that you want to include in the process and then run the tool. So let's check out what that looks like in practice. So we'll select that back of curb. I just ran the tool, and now we can see that we have handles existing where those other lines tie in. Keep in mind that you do want this line work to actually be touching the line for it to work. If it's not, then it will not apply that handle. So typically you might get the curb work and then you'll follow up and get like the sidewalk and the ramp lines, and then you'll just simply tie into that back of curb. It might not be at an existing handle. So this is where this tool kind of comes into play. All right. Delete all points near selected lines. This is, this tool now supports deleting points near points. Previously, it only worked off of the lines, but now it works off of the points too. So in this example, we have road points overlapping ground points, seen in the left image. And we want the road points to take priority here. So we're going to go ahead and remove any ground points that are too close. So we first want to select all of our road points via the element selection. Then we want to essentially just run the tool. So the tool will remove the levels that are checked on its list. You can see that the ground shots are checked. So anything within 5 feet of a road point is going to be removed, and those items that are going to be removed are what's checked on that list, such as ground shots. So you might be in an open field. This might not be the best example. Open field, maybe you ran the grid tool. You want to remove some of those key point items. Just control it by levels. That's essentially what this tool is going to allow you to do. Or if you have other points within your roadway and you want those to take priority over the road points, that's where you'd apply this. Up next is essentially a fencing tool. It's designed to build a fence around any selected elements. It works on most common elements, points, lines, arcs, etc. And seen on the left is the resulting fence envelope with an additional buffer applied. So use this to isolate regions for cropping, selecting, classifying, etc. Seen on the right, I've used some road lines to isolate the roadway surface, and then follow up with a classification routine for removing vehicles. So we can see that vehicle in red. That way I'm not running a classification routine off to the shoulder where I might have signs and poles and overhead objects that I want to keep. This is one way to isolate it onto like a road surface. And as a companion tool to the fencing routine, we figured we'd throw this one in there just in case. It's the random noise filter. Some of you may be familiar with this, some not, but it has been around for some time now. The main change is going to be the minimum cluster height to essentially help filter specific objects like cars, signs, and poles. Let me run the video here just to give you an idea of what this thing is doing. So this is just a paint stripe example. And the idea is you put constraints on, so we see those little blocks that come up. Well, you put constraints on those samples and say, hey, you got to be, you have to have a certain point count, you have to be a certain size, you can't be this high, or you have to be a minimum of a certain height. So that's where this tool is kind of utilized. So with that minimum cluster and height, it's going to be easier to remove cars or isolate cars, signs and poles, or remove them if you don't want them. All right, the next category is going to be element attribution, and I'd like to just start off by defining like what is attribution. And essentially, attribution just allows you to carry more information along with an element. And you can carry properties and metrics associated with something. And you'll essentially export this into a CSV or shapefile that's going to ultimately end up on a GIS database like Esri or ArcMap or something like that. And some examples of attribution are going to be, the description of something, the name, date, some ID number, maybe element ID, count associated with it. You got radius, so now we're getting into measurements, the height of an object, tilt, length, width, dimensional information. And what TopoDOT does is it assigns the attribution either during or after extraction. And that information is going to be stored compatible with Microstation or the Bentley product Microstation and Connect platform as item types. They were previously known as tags, but now we're using item types. But you might hear the word tag here or there. So if we look to the right, we can actually see a light pole. So it's just a cell, and we've tagged some information to that. Information such as like what the name of the object is, the height, post type, what side of the road it is, etc. We even stored the image associated with it, inspection dates. You can have drop downs for multiple selection. So that would come into play on like post type. You might have type A, B, C, and so on. What side of the road? Right side, left side, middle. Okay. Apply this to cells, lines, points, any element that you are dealing with. All right, so now that we got that defined, what's essentially new with attribution? Well, there's added support for more of it. And essentially what we've been looking at is the element properties a little bit more, but the big ones are pulling dimensional information, height, length, slope, something of that nature, some type of measurement. We can now store image paths from any view. Previously it was just locked into view 3 and 4, but now you can expand that to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, any view. We could do length, width, and area of rectangular shapes now. Okay. If we're looking into cells, we could pull the cell name and the description. If we're looking at particular elements, we're doing the level. You could do the element ID. You could do this description of the element, color, line style. I might not be listing them all, but definitely check out our wiki pages, either the Create Attribute Schema page or the TopoDOT tips for this entire slide here, actually. But the TopoDOT tips is going to list out some unique key-ins, which we're going to cover now. So another thing we added was the ability to update specific attribute fields. So if you are going through the hassle of designing these schemas, collecting this information and kicking it out to a GIS environment, well, if you've gone through that work of collecting all this information, you want to be able to modify or update a single field without touching any other field associated with it. So let's say we want to update the date or the Latin long while maintaining those existing attributes. The key-in you would use for that is listed here and followed by the actual attribute name that you want to modify. Okay, so if we go back to this list here, let's say I wanted to change the street number or the inspection date. It will only modify those attribute fields while leaving everything the same, because we don't want to replace or modify the height or anything like that. So that's pretty useful. I hope the people out there using or dealing with attributes recognizes the usefulness of that. Definitely take advantage of that. The next one's going to be a plotting capability for these attributes. So you can essentially plot specific attributes associated with any of those elements. Currently, I know that lines and points work. We may get into making it work for cells, but if you have attributed like lane lines or brake lines or anything like that, you can have a quick plotting routine to plot that information at the beginning of the line for QA/QC work. All right, so we're getting towards the end of the presentation here, and I just wanted to throw in some extra key-ins and tips and notes of that nature. So for the starters, we have this restore windows feature. So we've been noticing that sometimes a tool will just kind of disappear on you. You opened it. It's just either behind something or just off your monitor. Who knows? This key in here will basically restore those windows by grabbing them all and tucking them up into the upper left-hand corner for you so that you can easily get to it. The next one's going to be resetting your point cloud view, and essentially what happens is if you're starting off with our software, there are a lot of ways you can accidentally hide the point cloud without realizing it. So this key-in right here is going to be very useful for those starting off, or maybe even if you're a veteran and you're not sure what's happening. What this will do is it'll just reset defaults associated with your view, so it'll fit it It's going to change the display type. It's going to show classifications, things of that nature, so that while you're looking at your loaded data in your project manager and you're not seeing anything on your screen, use this tool and it should pop up immediately. Some other notes, if you are going into the routines of attribution before creating a schema, definitely focus on just mentally or listing them out before you start to build them. It'll just be easier that way. Definitely consult with us if you need guidance on that, because there's a lot of syntax involved, which that syntax can be found on the Create Attribute Schema page on the wiki. I've tried to list out as many as I can. And that schema ultimately is going to be saved as a XML file, which can be found on your C drive, TopoDOT GIS features folder. Another item here is I do see individuals not taking advantage of the F1 function. So if you are currently in the environment of TopoDOT and you have a tool open and you're active on that tool, hit F1 and it should launch you to the manual page, which is going to be our wiki pages. Okay, that's going to give you like the purpose of the tool, a brief demonstration, tool settings. We might even be giving you links back to the university page if it requires more of a workflow approach. So definitely take advantage of that. You do have to be registered for the university page to gain access to all that online content. Next item is there has been a couple of name changes, specifically for the TopoCloud platform. So TopoCloud itself, for data hosting, that's now going to be called TopoDOT Global Project Admin and Access. Okay, so the admin is for uploading data. The access side is for the TopoDOT user to gain access to that uploaded data within the TopoDOT environment. TopoCloud Pro, which was the web link, that is now going, or that web linked dashboard of your projects, that's going to be called TopoShare. Okay. And I thought I gave a link for that. Oh, yeah, I did the next one. So what's to come? Well, we're currently in the middle of redoing the row condition tool, so we're going to look into improvements to recognize the current distress information and more, improving the user interface and just the ability to like edit or modify after you run the tool. So making it a little bit more user friendly there. TopoShare, which I just mentioned, we are going to be allowing for a shareable free viewer. So if you have TopoShare and you want to provide a free image viewer for your client, that will eventually be possible. And if you're not familiar with TopoShare, definitely check out our latest blog on the what we call the just-in-time survey process. But we have it kind of laid out what it is, presentation on it, 2 presentations actually. So definitely visit that to get more information. And then power lines, of course, further improvements to workflows. And then with the random noise filter, we're going to be looking into adding filters, more filters, to help remove vehicle information off of roads. And with that said, if you're not sure what a tool is or what tool to use for a particular application, definitely consult with us, call us. We want you to establish the correct path or process. We want to make sure that there's no duplicate work being done. We want to save you time and money. And ultimately this will leave you with a cleaner drawing, cleaner exports for just an overall streamlined process. And then we can also help you identify any added value within your data set. If you're just doing one specific thing, talk with us. We'll look at it. We'll show you some other tools that can possibly apply. All right, so we're going to go ahead and open this up for questions. I'll also leave you with our contact information if you're not sure about that. But phone us, visit our website, or email us. Hit us up on socials. Thank you, for your time. Let's go ahead and open this up for questions.
Hello, everyone. This is Jen, in case you don't recognize me. So there's been a couple questions. Before we go ahead with the questions, I just wanted to clarify that if you are looking to update right now, you can go through the update branch and use the beta. We're going to send the release email by Friday. We're updating some wiki pages on some of the new stuff. So, but by then you should be able to download this latest stable release, and that'll be this version that we're talking about. But if you want to try it right now, you can download the beta, and it will be exactly the same.
Beta's a little bit. Beta's a little bit older.
Older? Okay. Okay. So,
it hasn't been updated yet, but I'll get that updated later today.
Today? Okay. So for the beta, Mauri?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. There you go. And then, so you should get an email by Friday. If you're not getting these emails, let us know. We want to make sure that our mailing list is updated and it's clean. We're going to be sending you later, I think around mid-March or end of March, a consent form for you to give us your consent to all of this information so we can keep emailing you important stuff. And I know that this is more relevant to Europe and California, but we want to try to get the consent from everybody around the globe, and just to make sure that you guys are okay with our communication. So just be on the lookout for those emails. As far as questions go about this release, let me go through a couple of questions. So Jeff wrote us about whether the F.dot workspace would be okay for this release, and he also checked and made sure that that release was up to update 14, which what that means is that you can install this version, but you're going to have problems with some of those Google Earth tools that are also related to the coordinate system and so on. You can still use the new tools, like the line modification or power line extraction tools that Mike showed you here, but you're going to have problems with the topo aerial and all those coordinate system tools. So just be aware of that. If you want to install it in for update 14, you can, but only update 15 will have that fixed. Another question we should have here is that the insert lines at the overlapping lines, insert nodes at the overlapping lines, the lines don't need to be touching in order for that tool to work. Otherwise, it won't place an additional node there. But if you don't automatically, if the lines are not touching right away, then you can actually use a drape to intersect tool. Or you could just move that endpoint to the line if it's not working. And you can do this globally too. Like Mike was showing here a version of the tool on like a few lines, but you can run it on multiple lines at the same time in more than just a few lines. So if you have a large project, then you can do that. But you also need to make sure that those nodes are created in case they were not touching. So there is another tool called Drape to Intersection tool that we didn't discuss this because it's a little bit older. that you could also use to try to create nodes there and intersect those lines together if need be, if you don't think they're touching. So let us know if you want to learn more about that. But it's also on the wiki, and that's called the drape to intersection. Let's see. As far as the information from the GIS information, the attribute information that is being collected through the asset ID or any other attribute information collection tool, is not available to be exported through the feature code export tool. So those are separate tools. But if you needed to have a CSV version of those attributes, you can actually export those attributes as CSV. It doesn't just have to be shape files. So they will be pretty much in the same format that you would get with the feature code export. So you don't need to use the feature code export to export a CSV file. You can do it directly through the attributes export or tool. And I think that is all. Marty, do you see anything else?
Someone asked about list of all possible key-in commands. Mike, did you have that on your presentation somewhere?
Go back. There you go.
Yeah, go to the TopoDOT tips page on our wiki. I can probably launch that now if you want me to.
Yeah, so the wiki is being updated constantly with all these new tools and new videos if you have questions about it. But the TopoDOT tips is relatively new. You can also see the change log for all of these changes in case you want to go back through the list and you don't have this presentation in front of you. So all of that information is there on the wiki. Go ahead, Mike.
Typed in the wrong one. But you can search, keep that in mind. But this is like the current running list of all those syntax items that are going to pull information or measure either within the asset ID tool or other tools that do attribution as you extract, or with the tag editor if you're doing like post attribution. And then the TopoDOT tips that I list down here, if you go back to the main page, we are adding, so you could also search tips and you'll get to the same location, which I might actually do. Hold on, let's see. Oh, here we go. TopoDOT tips. We're listing out some key-ins there. So you got key-ins only, and then you actually have kind of like an action string style key-in. But the plot information and the update tag information can be found on this page that I did mention in this presentation. Restore the windows, reset point cloud view, and kind of organizing it on what it does.
Yeah, so again, these are the functions that you can enter through the keying command in Microstation that don't have a button. So they're not necessarily in the ribbon. So you can just use these keying commands on the keying section of your Microstation. I think that's all then. We can hear you.
There's another question there, Mike, regarding the cross-section by points tool you were using.
Mm-hmm.
With regards to the template and how you created it. Basically, they're saying the template you were using only had a few lines connecting your points. Could you explain why? I don't remember seeing your video there. Or
let's just go back to it.
Can you pull it back?
Yep. Yeah, so I'm assuming that they're referring to this white segment in between the points, which this white segment here is going to be the the fitment template, okay? And then these actual green points, or in some cases they're red, those are going to be your breakpoints. So these breakpoints don't affect the fitment process. It's really just this shape that you add in there. And if you're curious to know like how to build these things, we have past webinars on not only the university page, but our webinars page that kind of dive into these topics of how to create templates more efficiently and how to make them compatible with your other line work, because you do want this template and these breaks to essentially sync with the break lines that you're extracting. So, previous to this tool, I may have used another template tool by path or by direction, or maybe I use the break line tool. But the naming convention has stayed consistent across all the tools. Because as you drag the sample across, in this case I'm producing a large one, it's intersecting those lines, doing the fitment process, and then if it has, based off of those lines that it's intersected, if it has those common breakpoints, it's going to update the line work too. So if I just had a random like default line in there, it would ignore it. So it does have to be compatible with those previous break lines.
Great. Also, guys, be aware that we open TopoDOT Users Conference for registration. So if you guys are new to TopoDOT or want to learn more about these updates, we're going to be running the latest version of TopoDOT during the conference. I know this is a hard time for everybody to travel and whatnot, but if you can come, we have, it is available for registration right now. If you can't come, if you can't make it, we will be doing a series of webinars throughout the year. So be on the lookout for emails from us. And hopefully by the fall, we'll revisit some of that information that we shared during talk and see if there is anything that we need to do about like a week of webinars or something similar to what we did that year. If you can't travel to Orlando for talk. But if you can come, we are trying our best to make it as safe as possible and to provide you with hands-on training for the 4 days of the conference. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time. If we didn't answer your questions, we will send you an email privately and just discuss this more further. But if you have any questions that we couldn't answer here or that you couldn't ask here, just send us an email to support@topodot.com. Thank you for your time. Talk to you soon.